This is a video to doctors, to dentists, to specialists, cardiologists, things like that, even dermatologists. Um, we hear stories, people like me hear stories about how certain groups of you are actually starting to refuse treatment or refuse to see certain patients that have not got the you know what, that have not, in these circles, we say, have not rented the movie. In these circles, we say, have not rented the movie Action Jackson, which the last word can be extended into Jacksonation, which is a word that's very similar to what we're describing here. We cannot speak freely in forums like this, or the videos will be banned. If you're new to these forums, trust me, that's what happens. First Amendment doesn't exist here, but that's not the point of this video. This is a video for dentists, doctors, specialists of all kinds. Um, I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, and I do have to give a tiny little legal precedent, of course, because Matt has to be perfect in his presentation. Matt's giving legal advice. No, the last time I looked, especially considering they apply ignorance of the law is no excuse, so one would assume that as a citizen of the United States, or that's what they call me, that I need to be informed and well read on these laws because ignorance of the law is no excuse. So the last time I looked under the Constitution of the United States, I do have the ability to talk about the laws of which I cannot be ignorant upon and talk with other, quote, citizens of the United States about those laws. That is not legal advice, nor is any part of this video legal advice. Let's get that out of the way. Um, can't even mention, anything about foods or nutrition. You're not licensed to talk about that, Matt. In the state of Florida or certain states, you can't even help somebody um, hang drapes or pick colors for the den without being licensed as an interior decorator. Yeah, and the Bill of Rights still exists somewhere. That's not the point. So, doctor, dentist, specialist, whatever, orthodontist, even dermatologist, if you don't take somebody because they haven't rented the movie, that's what I'm gonna say, or for the V, then aren't you opening yourselves up to gigantic $100 million lawsuits? What was quoted in A Christmas Story, major awards. Remember the guy got it's a major award. He got a leg lamp. You're going to get worse than a leg lamp if you don't treat patients simply because they made a medical choice. Now, if there are any rules left in this society, anything left, and there might not be, with thousands of violations to the Bill of Rights, there may not be, but if there are any rules left here, you don't need to be a lawyer or play one on TV to see that you, doctors, dentists, specialists, medical professions of all types, kinds, shapes, colors, creeds, and religions, are opening yourselves up to gigantic major award lawsuits if you choose or decide not to take somebody simply because they haven't got the you know what, which we say here in these circles to sidestep the freedom of speech Gestapo. We say rented the movie. Okay. Now, I don't need to be, I guess, have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in the Harvard Law Library to figure out if there are any rules left here. You're setting yourselves up for big problems. If are any lawyer groups, and this is a big if as well, if there are any lawyer groups that are interested in making money by pursuing claims against doctors or dentists or whatever that refuse to see people, but then because they refuse to see these people, something major happened to their health that could have potentially been avoided or overcome if the doctor or dentist or whoever specialist would have been able to see these people. So let's just start with the basics. In general, do lawyers like to make money? Well, yeah, that's all they do. Excuse me. You know what happens when I start talking. Do lawyers like to make money? Yeah, then he has these class action lawsuits over basically nothing ever happened before. Somebody spills coffee on themselves. Yeah, it happened. Somebody got like $400 million for spilling coffee on themselves, just did it to themselves, and the fast food franchise had to pay. So okay, we got that out of the way. Do lawyer groups that deal in this sort of class action nature, or some would even say, and it's completely unprecedented, I would never use this term, some would even say ambulance chase lawyers. These lawyer groups, do they like to go after doctors at all? I know it's rare. Yeah, I guess they do like to go after doctors. You probably could look up what case is currently brewing today, and they're like one doctor somewhere in Louisiana left one millionth of a piece of a sponge inside of a patient during a surgery, and now the repercussions and ramifications and medical consequence of 1 millionth of a piece of sponge left inside of a patient during a surgery. The lawyer groups are arguing he can't even mow the lawn anymore. You try putting a tiny 1 millionth of a piece of a sponge inside you, and you see what you can do. He can't even get out of bed in the morning. That's $100 million. That's what somebody's probably fighting for that today. I haven't looked at the case, the active cases for today, but somebody's. So we got that established that the legal profession does like to go after doctors. Yeah, that's happened once or twice. Why doctor groups today that have like 5 doctors, family practitioners, 5 doctors, a few RNs, and a staff, somebody to scan your insurance. They're paying in some states, depending on what their specialty is or where they are, they could be paying $10,000 to $15,000 a month in professional liability insurance, simply because of how lawsuit happy this country is. So we've got that established. So I haven't looked at it closely, but are there lawyer groups now that are just licking their chops or can't wait to go after doctor groups because they refuse to treat somebody that wouldn't get the V, and then it could be proven or shown because they weren't treated or they weren't seen by their doctor or their cardiologist or their oncologist or their specialist that something big happened to them, and then couldn't that lawyer group say, well, if you would have seen them, they wouldn't have had that stroke. We're going to sue you for $100 million. So it would be there basically be no rules left in this country if there aren't a lot of lawyer groups just licking their chops, waiting for a doctor to not see somebody because they just made a choice to not get the V or they made a past medical choice. And if this, it's basically, I don't even want to say these terms that I normally say, guys, because I don't know where this video is going to go. But let's just say I can't use the words I normally like to use, but it would be beyond strange if there weren't a lot of these class action lawyer groups just waiting for a medical repercussion where a doctor refuses treatment or refuses to see a patient, which they had long history with that patient because they simply didn't get it, you know, get it in the arm. You know what I mean? So let's just back up for a second. I don't think you don't need to be like the top of your class at Harvard to make this presentation. If you could eventually get to a lawsuit that then you could get a jury of your peers, a real jury. These major awards that come out of these huge class action lawsuits eventually get before a jury. Okay, I understand that the system itself, of which judges, local politicians, I would think lawyer groups are part of the system itself. I would think that it would be very rare for them to kind of go after the system itself when they are part of the system itself, because any sort of major lawsuit that's successful against these doctor groups because they refuse to see people ultimately will end up benefiting our group, those that don't want to do it, those that don't want to rent the movie. So, do I expect there are any lawyer groups now waiting to pounce with class action lawsuits against doctor groups who refuse treatment for people that haven't got in the arm? No, I don't think that's probably ever going to happen, which I can't even use the terms I like to put on that. It would be beyond strange because we've already established that lawyers like to go after doctors and lawyers like money. I don't know, that's a stretch, I know, but so, but if anybody's saying, well, that's a hard case to make, no, it's probably the easiest case to make in the history of law. Again, I'm not I have to, again, pause and say, no way is anything here should be considered legal advice. The last time I looked, because they put on to all of us that ignorance of the law is no excuse. So ignorance of the law is no excuse. Then it goes without saying I'm expected to be well versed and read up on all the laws, or at least as many as I can. Who could get through millions and millions of pages of books? But if ignorance of the law is no excuse, then I guess as they call me a citizen, I'm supposed to be well versed. And the last time I looked, I think the Bill of Rights still allows like one citizen to talk to another about the laws that could affect both of them. I don't think that you just jump right to somebody giving legal advice. So I have to, in these making these presentations in this YouTube channel, I need to be perfect and make sure people know it's not legal advice. So let's get that out of the way. But if I was, let's just say if it were me and I was, making a presentation, I got to that trial stage where, I had a certain medical condition. The doctor's like, you can't come into my office. I'm not going to see you because you didn't. And something happened. I wasn't able to get my medications, or I was feeling bad and then I had a stroke, or something. Something happened. And there's how many, with these stories we're hearing about these doctors or dentists, et cetera, refusing to see somebody because they haven't had it. I mean, you just think there's going to be a flood of these situations where any savvy lawyer could say, well, if you would have seen your patient of 10 years, this could have been avoided. You know, we're looking for $100 million major award, a Christmas story leg lamp. We're going after the $100 million major award. You made this bad decision not to see your own patient based on a medical decision they did or did not make. So if it were me, guys, again, you don't need to be at the top of your class in Harvard Law to make this presentation. It's as simple as it gets. First off, you make basically a Matt Damon type presentation. If I'm addressing, the jury for my major award, representing myself, this doctor, from contact, these scientists, these doctors, and my doctor groups, and my cardiologist, and my oncologist, and my dentist, and all of my dermatologist, they refused to see me because I didn't get the V. And now I have all these problems. And what defense are these scientists here? What defense are they going to have? So you start with the basics. You start with the Matt Damon case in Good Will Hunting, the courtroom scene, case law, case precedent, legal precedent. I don't know what a law professor would say, but like 70% of everything is legal precedent because these cases have been tried for 50 years, 100 years, 150 years. What did Matt Damon say? He says, well, in the scene, you have to do the whole scene. He says, I'm allowed to speak my own defense, sir. This is guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. This is the same document that guarantees my liberty. What did he say when liberty's when and liberty, I remind you, sir, is a soul's right to breathe. And when a soul cannot take a full breath, laws are girded too tight. So you start there and you say, and then that's the other part of it is he says, case precedent, Your Honor, 1785, when a citizen can take physical and violent action against those of the state, when that act is considered an act of self-defense. So 1785, Your Honor, and he says something like 1885, William Lloyd Beecher, something to the Plymouth pulpit, said, and I quote, 1885, and then the other lawyers like, we making a mockery of the courtroom. The point is, this is all real. There is huge. The courts are supposed to look at similar decisions going back a long time, and what's incredibly one-sided about this whole thing is, look, if I looked at every case, no, but can anybody point to a case precedent anywhere, and I mean anywhere, going back 150 years, where a doctor could decide not to treat somebody because of a medical decision that that person had made in the past? Does that even exist? You want to talk about a completely one-sided case law and legal precedent stacked in the favor of somebody that's not allowed to get into their doctor's office because they haven't gotten the V. You want to talk about the easiest layup of all time for a class action suit? To step up here and say, there's no legal precedent whatsoever that medical providers, and it's not like somebody knocking at the door, okay, to get into a doctor. Will you see me? I've never been here before. They have a long history with these people, which makes the argument about 1,000 times more rock solid. Some of the, we hear these stories of a cardiologist won't see them because they're not allowed in the office because they haven't gotten the V. These are 5 and 10 year patients. So you want to talk about a totally one-sided stacked against the doctors trying to defend themselves, or the lawyers trying to defend the doctors against hopefully any class action lawyer group that would actually try to pursue this. And if they don't try to pursue this, then what does that tell you? I mean, I can't even talk about what that tells you. This video would get too strange. So that's number one. You also have related to the insurance issue, although, again, it's the insurance company does not dictate exactly what the doctor does, but if that doctor is part of an HMO group or a strictly controlled HMO that's part of the insurance company, like certain Blue Cross groups or whatever, then the insurance company absolutely is tied in to the doctor. And I reviewed every insurance policy ever? No, but I've reviewed a lot in what I've done over the past 25 years. There's nothing in the policy whatsoever that would even of course hint at any form of discrimination. That who is this policy for? White men, ages this that just it can't exist. Of course, it doesn't exist. There's nothing in the insurance policy that would ever back up a doctor's ability to make this decision. But the insurance company is secondary to the doctor's decision. So you have another major um, silver bullet in the metaphorical gun of the class action group that would, in the end, be representing, if this is even possible, would have to, in the end, represent those who have chosen not to get the V. You have discrimination law, and in specifically insurance discrimination law, in the tens of thousands of pages. If somebody were to pour over, I don't know the names of all the anti-discrimination uh, legal precedent related to insurance or dot 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 that somehow could be extended into insurance. But you have like HIPAA, ERISA, this law of the OBRA, COBRA. I mean, these are not some of these are not applicable, of course, but you have a whole set of insurance law of which have I been over it? No, but don't. It's pretty. I could feel pretty confident that there's no provision in this law or statute that would say, oh, a doctor at any time would be allowed to refuse treatment from an existing patient just because of what in their opinion would be a poor medical decision. That ain't going to be in there. And then you could extend it to general discrimination, uh, legal statute and precedent and ordinance, of which there's what, tens of thousands of pages, probably 1,000 lines that you could pull out of some of these statutes and point to the fact that if a doctor does not see somebody because they haven't done a certain thing, that this is not has nothing to do with insurance. It's just blatant discrimination, because you would have to have some sort of precedent where a doctor could step up in 18 William Smith Beach, something the Plymouth parables from the Plymouth pulpit said that this doctor said, I don't like the medical decision you made 2 weeks ago, and because I don't like the medical decision you made, or in this case it's a non-decision, but it's still a medical decision that the doctor is not going to like and approve of, then I'm not going to see you. And then there's no precedent for that. And then you combine that, you're building your sandwich and you put your mayo on, your lettuce and your onion, and hold the pickles, hold the relish. And then you put the bun on either side is the thousands and thousands of pages of anti-discrimination lawsuit. This is where they screwed up. The system loves their anti-discrimination. There's probably 1,000 lines a savvy law group could point to that would support if anybody wasn't seen and then they had a medical problem that could be in some way tied to the fact that the doctor didn't see them. And there's a million examples of how that could happen. Even something as, I'm not talking as severe as, I want to see my cardiologist, but you won't see me. I'm stressed out by this whole situation. I think my blood pressure's up, but you won't see me because I haven't rented the movie. And then something happens, a stroke or a heart attack. I'm not talking about even something major. It could be something as benign as to get even depression medication to avoid lawsuit and to keep their professional liability insurance down below $15,000 a month. A lot of the doctors they'll prescribe over the phone, but at some point they'll say, look, we haven't seen you for a year, or we haven't seen you for 6 months, or whatever the state or the doctor is. We need to see you before and talk to you and check you out before we'll give you more depression medication. This is the case with almost everything, of course. I'm sure if you lose your high blood pressure medication, they'll probably call it into you. But at some point, they're like, hey, we haven't seen you for a year and a half. You got to come in before we can prescribe again. You would think that the bigger half of that is a doctor group actually caring about the patient. But unfortunately, what's driving that is cover your ass mentality against lawsuit. That if something happens to somebody, everything they do is based about avoiding lawsuit. That's why if what I'm talking about now isn't pursued by these I don't want to. Why would anybody call them ambulance chasers? That's just not. They're not that. That's just completely disrespectful. If anybody, let's just call them class action professionals. If these class action professionals don't go after this, then again, there's a little bit of evidence that we have like something very strange is going on here because these types of cases to make should be a complete layup. So the class action but you want to talk about an impossible reality situation or an oxymoron. Is it possible for a group that completely serves what we call the system? I'm straying into areas where now only regular subscribers will understand what I'm saying, but I'll get back to the regular presentation in a moment. Is it possible for a group that completely serves the system more than almost any other group, say class action lawyers? Is it possible for them to actually go against the wishes of the big guy, go against the wishes of the big system, and actually in pursuing their own greed and their own monetary pursuits of major leg lamp awards, they're actually helping us? See, that might not be possible. And if that doesn't happen, what does that tell you about the system we have here? I'd like to say more, but I can't. But again, I didn't spend hundreds of hours in the Harvard Law library doing research here, and this certainly isn't legal advice. But last time I looked, one citizen was allowed to talk to another because ignorance is no excuse. You put that shit on us. It's a one-sided case. Mr. Dentist, Mr. Lab technician, Mr. Cardiologist, oncologist, all those that refuse to treat patients because they didn't get it, or I'll treat you. Even if they say, well, Matt, I can hear somebody rising up to talk to me and yell at me. Matt, they'll continue treatment, but it'll be telemedicine or whatever. So no lawyer could ever bridge that into $100 million Christmas story, leg lamp major award. No lawyer group could ever say, well, wait a second, if you would have seen them in person, like checked their blood pressure, looked at the pupil dilation, looked in their ears, you could have avoided, but you made it. Telemedicine was not the choice of your patient, was it, sir? You'd forced them into telemedicine because you were afraid to take them in because they hadn't gotten the V. Of course, they could. That would be a little bit of a hindrance to these lawyer groups if a doctor group only offered telemedicine. But from what I hear, many of them are just kicking them off, saying, you've got 30 days to find somebody else. Well, what is there even a line in the letter that says, well, if you have a true emergency, you can certainly come in? Is that even in there? I doubt that's even in there. But it's so one-sided. I mean, you literally remember the first lawyer that represented one of those two kids in My Cousin Vinny? The guy was like, he was like, I don't even know what the guy said. He was a complete useless. And then the guy was eventually like, I'm firing this guy. I want Vinny. That guy could present if a doctor group refused to see somebody and something big happened because they were refused. That guy could get $100 million Christmas story leg lamp major award out of a doctor's group. And he's just completely incompetent. What about these sharp, the guys that took $200 billion from the cigarette companies? And I mean, these guys are as sharp as you possibly can imagine. And what would the defense be? There's the dentist, the oncologist, the flounder, Bluto, D-Day, Pinto. Why Pinto? Why not? I mean, what's their defense? What's the lawyer going to say? Well, we have. Do you have case precedent? where somebody, because they made in your opinion, a bad medical decision, where a doctor couldn't see them or refused, and that refusal was upheld? No, we ain't got nothing there. Do you have anything in the insurance policy that relates to your doctor group about how you can refuse people? Is there any? Do you have any of that anti-discrimination precedent that was mostly put up for race and religion and other things? But is there anything in there that says, oh yeah, Matt, all this anti-discrimination statute and thousands and millions of pages of laws, every single one of them, Matt says, but a doctor can refuse treatment because if they just don't like the medical decisions their own patients making? That's so ridiculous, because the whole point is of a doctor is to overcome bad medical decisions in the past and to correct the health of the patient. It flies in the face of everything. There's nothing these defense attorneys representing in this fictitious example, which this is in no way legal advice. Of course, this is just one person talking to another. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, so I'm not allowed to talk about it. Anyway, they would have nothing. They would have nothing. I mean, what if if I'm no lawyer, what if I was defending myself or whatever, gave that presentation to the jury? What's the jury going to do? And I would also instruct the jury that, you might think personally that, this person's a bad person because they didn't get the V. And you might personally think that, well, they could jeopardize but that's not the point here. The point is you have to follow the law. And it would lead to, there'd be $100 million lawsuit after another. Now, okay, this all goes away. Could you imagine if the Congress, Matt, you're giving the Congress ideas. Yeah, I'm sure they haven't thought this through. Matt's just sharing hidden knowledge with the Senate. They haven't, in their dark circles, they haven't thought this through. But are they going to put some sort of statute in place that um, actually makes it's like a hold harmless potentially for these doctor groups? Are they going to do that? Until they do that, and of course, that should be considered unconstitutional. It should be thrown out by the Supreme Court if any of those people were real and actually referred to the Constitution before making decisions, instead of referred to their own political aims and their own political cronyism. If they were to actually apply the Constitution, even if the Senate and the House put in a bill that says doctor groups are now allowed to, if you don't get it, to deny treatment, that should be thrown out as completely unconstitutional under the Bill of Rights. But it doesn't work that way anymore. Our system doesn't work that way anymore. So that would be enough to where it would probably protect the doctor groups and squash the Christmas Story leg lamp major award, $100 million decisions against them for being discriminatory and not taking patients. But until that happens, it should be open season for the class action lawyers, just waiting, circling like vultures for one thing to happen to one person denied treatment because they weren't allowed in the doctor's office because they didn't get the V. Is that going to happen? And if it doesn't happen, okay, I've made enough of a neutral presentation as I can. If somebody that's new here wants to write me off at the end completely, because I'm just going to discuss some things that they don't quite understand, and they found the first part of my argument to be relatively sound and intelligent, well, there's nothing I can do about that. It's basically would be a reality breakdown to me if there aren't 100, 200 major medical problems that come because that are forced by a doctor that refused to see a patient, and then a class action law firm that are just, you ever hear there's too many lawyers in this country for the amount of things to pursue? Like whenever they have a legitimate thing to pursue, they're all going to jump on it. So if they don't jump on it, and it is as one-sided, their cases as one-sided as I've presented here, then it is like a reality breakdown. Why wouldn't they? You just go to our lawyers. Do they like money? Yes. Do they like to go after doctors? Yes. It all lines up in their favor. So if no lawyer groups do go after this, which ultimately would benefit people like me that are going to avoid getting it, then what does that tell you? I mean, how do you explain that? Um, and again, I don't know who. I don't. It's just a loose term I'm using, reality breakdown. But how would you explain that? Because You know, what part of my presentation here is anybody going to disagree? Did I get it wrong? That there's the whole host of of case law that the doctors are allowed to deny treatment to their existing 5 and 10 year patients because they don't like one medical decision the patient made, so they're going to shut the doors. That just doesn't exist. Do I know that? I say that definitively, but I would highly doubt there's even one case of that going back to Henry Beecher, whatever, parables from the Plymouth pulpit. You know, this is a document that guarantees my liberty, sir. And liberty is a soul's right to breathe. And when a soul cannot take a full breath, laws are girded too tight. Ibid. What does he say? Man, without liberty, man is a cinco. A what? Ibid, Your Honor. I don't know what the hell that is. But the courtroom scene, um, the way he's defending himself, really should be, what a court in this country is all about, and it's not. It's not about that anymore, of course. And I don't want to get too conspiratorial as to the real role of the court in this system, but we'll just leave it at that. And I'll look at your comments. Thanks, guys.